What's up, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of our NBA series where we are breaking down a prospect for the 2020 NBA draft. My name is Jordan Jica, aka Dr. Fantasy. As always, here with my co host, the Fantasy Caveman. Today, we will be breaking down Tyrese Maxey. And let me start her up here. Tyrese Maxey, 6'3", 198-pound freshman from Kentucky. Last season, he averaged 14 points, 4.3 rebounds, and 3.2 assists. Let's kick it off with his strengths. Caveman, what do you have for Tyrese Maxey's strengths?
All right, yeah, he's the first thing that I noticed when it comes to Maxey is he's very athletic and quick. You watch him, like he can, and this is something I don't see a ton of with a lot of prospects. He can start and stop on a dime. It's just impressive watching him be able to go from full speed to be able and then stop it and instantly and be able to do what he wants with that. I don't think you see that with a lot of guys being able to do it quite like that. Another thing is when he drives to the rim, you mentioned he's only 6'3", so he's not, he's not tall by any means, but he is not afraid. He does not shy away from contact when he goes to the paint. Like he'll go right into the guy, no matter if he's a foot taller than him. Like he'll literally go right into him and either get a shot off or draw some contact or get it in there. So that's the thing. You see a lot of guys, especially guards. I don't see a lot of guards really going into the paint and not shying away from contact. A lot of them, once they're about to get some contact, they throw up a little floater or they pass it out or they shy away. But Maxey goes full speed ahead and go right into the guy in the paint, which you love seeing that kind of will there. And then finally, and this kind of ties into a weakness that I'm sure we'll talk about. But he has a very excellent free throw percentage, given his field goal percentage, his 3-point percentage. So I think above 80%. There's actually 83.3% at the line. So a very solid free throw shooter. And a lot of guys, I don't see a ton of guys shooting above 80% from the free throw line.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these guards and even these 3-point shooters are anywhere from like 75 to 78%. But he was well up over 80 at 83, and I guess that's something that you like to see. And then finally, when you really look at it, his defensive IQ and effort is something to watch, and I think that'll come into play when I talk about later on when I talk about some NBA team fits. There's several teams that would just love the defensive IQ and effort that he brings.
Yeah, and for the most part, most of my strengths for him are on the offensive side of the ball. And just watching this, you mentioned it, his quickness is absolutely amazing. He is very explosive, and he uses it to score at all three levels. You see him drive to the paint, you see him pull up at mid-range, you see him from the three-point line. You mentioned the three-point percentage wasn't quite there, but I'm sure we'll talk about that in a minute. But, this is a guy that knows how to score the basketball from every single level of the floor. So he's one of those guys. I'm not 100% sure about his defensive upside. I think that he at least shows the effort and willingness to play defense, which, I've mentioned that several times. These guys are athletic. I think that's most of the battle in playing defense is just being willing to. So I think he's going to improve as a defender. Once again, I mentioned this in a few other episodes. A lot of people speak very highly of his motor and his work ethic and his character and being a great teammate. So, I think that's a huge advantage to him. And I think the last thing that I'll add here is he's a great ball handler. We haven't really mentioned that, but using his quickness and being able to score at every level requires a lot of skill as a ball handler. So I see him, especially as you watch this a little bit, you'll see him make some pretty highlight-worthy plays. This is one of the longer highlight films that I found on any player. So he's definitely a highlight reel kind of player. And I'll add to his strengths. I really like his hair, and that's got to count for something. So.
Oh yes, that's all the difference.
He's got gray hair.
I honestly think teams should draft players based on their hairstyle.
Yeah, Kentucky has, if you're watching this highlight film, Kentucky has some great hair, so they know how to scout players and their hair, which I think goes out to John Calipari. He's doing a great job. To their weaknesses, I'll start off, I guess, this one. Why not? We'll switch it up. I like to keep you on your toes. Right. One that I know we talked about before we started recording, but that's his playmaking. This is a guy that isn't really, I mean, he wants to score the basketball. He's not looking to set up his teammate. He's not a traditional point guard, floor general. He's everything that Trey Jones is not, from when we talked about Trey Jones. So definitely a little bit of a weakness for me because he needs to play off the ball, but he doesn't have the best size. I mean, you mentioned his willingness to go into the paint, but defensively, I'd be interested to see him guard some bigger twos to see if he could keep up with their size. He definitely shows the energy and effort and willingness to do so, but how effective it is against some of these big two guards, I think, is a whole nother question. So that's one of the things that I've seen. And we talked about the 3-point percentage, or I brought it up just briefly. I mean, that's a concern. He only shot, 29.2% from three. I mean, that's pretty poor. And as much as he has the ability to score at all three levels, he has a tendency sometimes to just chuck up some pretty terrible three-pointers.
Yeah.
And he shows, and he has with that quickness, I'd like to see him go to the paint even more instead of just settling for contested threes. So if he's able to improve that, though, he has all the quickness and ability to score more from the paint. And it's not that he can't shoot from three. It's just he's got to be more selective with it. And I think that's a huge that might be the stickling point, and that may be the difference between him being a very solid instant offense kind of player off the bench versus him being a borderline all-star starter. I think that could be the difference right there.
Yeah, and I pretty much completely agree with everything you had to say there. In terms of his playmaking, like you watch him, so he makes the passes that he's supposed to make, but he doesn't really make any of the high-level reads that you want out of a point guard.
Yep.
So I mean, especially with his size, he's not going to be able to play the two at the next level. He's just too small. So he's going to kind of be that scoring first point guard for somebody. And if that is your role, you need to at least be able to have some playmaking ability when teams zone in on you. And he just doesn't have that really playmaking ability that you would like to see out of a point guard. And like with his shot, like I like his form and I like his release. It's not bad by any means. And when you talk about guys that shoot low percentage from three, you really want to take a look at two things for me. There's their shot selection and their free throw percentage. Because those are two things that could be very telling when you're looking at a guy's 3-point percentage. So like you said, he shot 83% from the line, which shows me that his form is not bad and it's really solid. And like you mentioned, he throws up a ton of contested 3-point shots when he could easily either pass it to an open teammate or drive to the rim. He's so quick and athletic, like we talked about with the strengths. If he wants, he can get to the rim pretty much at any time he wants to. He's so quick, but he just, for some reason, he likes to settle for contested 3-point shots, which is very frustrating watching him play. Because if he has better shot selection and just better, I would say, he doesn't have a very high offensive IQ.
Mm-hmm.
And you see a lot of these point guards, like, maybe they're not the biggest threat offensively, but they have a good offensive IQ. and Maxey just doesn't have the IQ offensively, so I think that's something that could really hinder him at the next level.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. So let's go to NBA player comparisons. I'm gonna let you start this one because you have a lot of names, and I'm looking forward to hearing who you have.
All right, so I'm gonna throw this one out there right away, and this doesn't mean that I really like the guy. I just see shades of it, but I see shades of Allen Iverson in him.
Oh no.
Tell me I'm that wrong, because Iverson was never really a playmaker. Wasn't really. I mean, he did enough passing the ball, but he didn't. He wasn't really that good of a playmaker. He was a score first point guard tactically because he was so small as well. I mean, Maxey is a couple inches taller than him, but you don't. I know you don't like Iverson, but you got to admit that you see there's some shades of Allen Iverson, and especially with his questionable shot selection as well. That's a very similar.
Oh, when you put it that way, yes.
Because of his questionable shot selection, he's like Iverson. A couple other names though, and curious to get your thoughts on these as well. The other name that come to mind is Bryn Forbes of your San Antonio Spurs. I think that might be his kind of like floor. So if he turns into Bryn Forbes, what Bryn Forbes is for the Spurs, not the worst career. It's kind of a solid depth guard. And then I'm just thinking, given his frame and ability and his lack of ability to be a playmaker, I'm thinking like a poor version of CJ McCollum. Just kind of that score first guard. You kind of see when CJ had to run the team without Dame, I didn't think he was the greatest at setting up his teammates. That's just not CJ's game. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something you see with Maxey as well. He's never going to be that guy that puts his teammates in great positions. He just doesn't have that level of IQ, but he still can be and that's the concerning thing with him, is just that he's best suited as a combo guard, but he doesn't have the size to be a combo guard. Mm-hmm. And that's the unfortunate thing with a lot of these guys. But yeah, so those are a couple of Bryn Forbes, CJ, some shades of AI. Another name, Lou Williams, is another name. Lou Williams is more of a score first combo-ish guard. So those are a couple of the names that I had.
Yeah, and I think those are good ones. The Allen Iverson one, just for the record, this is like one of Allen Iverson's biggest fans. So that says not me, by the way. Caveman, not me.
Oh, I thought you said Maxey was a fan of AI.
No, you. I just want to make that very clear. I do not like Allen Iverson. But you, so that's saying a lot. I'm really surprised you would throw that comparison out there. There's two names that come to mind for me. One of them you said, Lou Williams. I think that would be, that's a direction I see his career going in. More of like that Lou Williams, Jordan Clarkson role, coming off the bench, being instant offense. I think that's what you're going to look at with Tyrese Maxey long term. So I had both of those. More Lou Williams. I see a lot of Lou Williams with his scoring ability. So, and Lou Williams is a guy that does not really play the point overly effectively, and he's only 6'1". He's actually smaller than Maxey. So he's seemed to carved out a pretty good career doing it. So I think that would be kind of ideal for Maxey. Another name out for me, and maybe it's just the hair, but Colin Sexton kind of came to mind, and I liked what I saw from Colin Sexton for the Cavs last year, but he's the definition of an undersized score first kind of point guard. So yep. That was another name, and like I said, probably because of the hair, because they both have kind of cool hair. I think that's the first thing that stood out. But then when I actually thought about it, I think it makes a lot of sense anyway. So
I think from now on, what I'm gonna do with the rest of these comparisons is find the NBA hairstyle comparison.
Yeah, I mean, I should have mentioned for Jalen Smith, I do like he wears goggles. That's pretty cool. I mean, you gotta like a guy that wears goggles sometimes. So, I saw another one. I don't know if you have thoughts about this. This is just based on some research I've done, and I like to see what other people say about prospects as well. And sometimes I think they're insane, and sometimes I'm like, yeah, I could see it. But a lot of people were saying Tyreek Evans. I don't know if I really like that one. I can see the
Uh,
direction that they're going in just based on a point guard that's more score first. But I mean, Tyreek Evans had a little more size, if I'm not
oh yeah, he
mistaken, than
was he like
Maxey.
6'5" or something
Yeah, I
like
was gonna
that?
say I was trying to find his height here, but he was a little taller than Maxey and had some
He was
6'6" actually.
6'6". Yes, I was just looking
So
up
I was
six.
gonna say I saw that comparison on several different scouting sites, and I don't really like that comparison. Honestly, I get where they're going based on his scoring ability, but I don't love that one. I just want to throw that in there. So let's go over to our last part here. Ideal NBA fits. I think I usually start this one off, so I'm gonna switch it up, and Caveman's going first.
Oh, that how nice of you. So I have a couple of teams, and I alluded to this earlier when I was talking about his. I think, and you don't really think that much of his defensive ability. I kind of the opposite. I really like how he plays defense. I think he's gonna be a really good defender at the next level. I'm thinking of a guy like the Miami Heat. Simply because I just love the way he plays defense. And you look at the Miami Heat's uh, point guard situation. You mean Dragic is probably not going to be there next year. You have Kendrick Nunn, but behind that, you don't really have a ton of. They don't really have a ton of playmaking guards. I mean, you have guys like Duncan Robinson, Tyler Harrow, and that, but they're not really playmakers. Which I don't know. I mean, I'm not a he was a bit tougher. I just think Bond like he seems like a type of player that the Heat would target, and I rumored that the Heat. I've seen several reports that the Heat are very interested in Tyrese Maxey. So that could be a team. Another team that I think is more ideal fit for him is the Dallas Mavericks.
Mm-hmm.
I love this. I love that fit. You can put him next to Luka. He wouldn't have to really be a playmaker because that's not his game. And I think he's very solid defensively. You can take him and put him on the other team's best guard. And I think he would fare well with his defensive ability. And then he can just kind of be kind of that off the ball, which I think he's better suited for, and just get passes from Luka Doncic and just hit shots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's one of the ones that I was considering was the Maverick. So I think that's a very solid a solid chance there. The Heat are kind of interesting to me because I don't know where he would fit in with the Heat, and I've read as well that they're interested in him. So I think it would be interesting to see how they utilize him because I mean, they even without Dragic, they do have quite a few guards because Tyler Hero is more of a playmaker than people give him credit for, and he showed that in the playoffs. So I think he can play the one. So I don't know. I've read that a lot too, and if it happens, I'll be interesting to see how they use him. But I like the Mavericks one. The other one that I have, they have the 21st pick right now. Maxey's been going kind of in that late lottery to right in that range, anywhere from like 15 to 22-ish I've seen him. So the 76ers are the
Mm-hmm.
one that I had. The reason I think this makes a lot of sense is because he can play off the ball with the
Mm-hmm.
76ers. If he's playing next to Ben Simmons is a playmaker, And with Ben Simmons' size, you can, on the defensive end, you can make up for Maxey's lack of size. You can have Simmons take on the bigger 2-3 guys that Maxey can't defend potentially at the next level, and have Maxey defend the other team's smallest guy on the floor. So I think him playing next to Ben Simmons makes a lot of sense. He wouldn't be inserted in the starting lineup immediately, because unless they move some of those contracts, because as of right now, they have a very solid starting lineup with Simmons, Josh Richardson, Tobias Harris. If they move on from one of those contracts, maybe Maxey could start at some point. But if anything, he can fill that perfect role of instant offense off the bench, play next to Ben Simmons. I think that a Ben Simmons Maxey combination makes a lot of sense because they're the polar opposite of one another. So I that's my ideal fit. I think is the 76ers is the number one fit that I landed on. So final thoughts on Maxey. For me personally, this is a game today where offense is a focal point. That's a reality of today's NBA. And that's why I think Maxey, no matter what, is going to carve himself out a nice role. I'm kind of interested to see what his ceiling is because honestly, as we sit here and talk about him, I'm undecided. I mean, if we're talking about Maxey, can I see him developing into an all-star player? I mean, maybe. So, I mean, he has that potential. I don't know if I can see him. I don't know if I can see him doing it. He's tough for me, and he has solid defensive ability. I don't want to act like I hate his defensive ability. I just think it's his size.
His defensive ability.
Like, I love his effort. That's what I mean. I love his effort. It's just his size really concerns me. But if he's guarding the other team's smallest guy on the floor, I think he'll be fine. It's just I don't think you can really afford to have him guarding most two guards in today's game. I think that would be a disaster. Not a disaster because he puts in the effort at least, unlike some people that we won't mention. But I haven't brought it up in any prospect episode, so I had to throw it in there. It's James Harden, but
I had no idea you were talking about James Harden.
Well, in case people listening don't know who I'm talking about, it's that bum. But
yeah.
He's one of those guys. We've talked a lot, and I've been pretty decisive in saying some guys I think they have superstar potential. Some guys I think they have a very high floor. Maxey, I'm very uncertain on. I think that he's going to have a role in the NBA. Based on his scoring ability alone, he won't fizzle out. Everybody's looking for offensive ability like Tyrese Maxey has, but I don't know if he how much potential he has. That's the only thing I'm kind of on the fence about is can he carve out a role at his size in today's game long term for somebody to rely on him in their starting lineup? I don't know. I think that's to be seen.
Yeah, I'm pretty much on board with you, and I don't because I think he's one of those guys where you see a lot of these higher end prospects have a lot of bust potential. Yep. I don't think Maxey's really gonna bust. I don't see that. I don't see it in him. Like when we talked about a guy like Jaden McDaniels who has oozes and oozes of bust potential. Same with a guy like Cole Anthony also has oozes of bust potential. But Tyrese Maxey his game doesn't scream really bust potential, but at the same point, his game doesn't really scream multiple all-star appearances, and he's a guy I could see him possibly making an occasional all-star team, but for me at this point in his career, he's pretty one-dimensional on the offensive end, so I don't. Yeah, it's just tough. Like, I mean, he's right. He's somewhere in the middle. I think his draft. And he's actually one of the more guys consistently I'm seeing in the where he's being drafted among mocks. He doesn't really vary a touch in all the mocks I see, and he's kind of going in a spot where, you're going to get what you expected out of him. You're probably not going to get a ton more, but again, if he doesn't live up to his potential, he's not going to break you. So I think that's the interesting thing with him.
Yeah, and if I'm thinking about him at his ceiling, in my opinion, it would be like CJ McCollum probably. a guy that's just very borderline all-star. McCollum's never made an all-star team, but every year you kind of talk about him on the border though every single season. So
TJ should have made the all-star team this year.
He probably should have. So I mean I think that's Maxey's best case scenario. I just can't see him becoming a superstar personally. So I think that he's going to be better served as kind of a number 3 scoring option at his best. And but more realistically, I think he's instant offense off the bench, which I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, especially with the range he's going in. He's not really expected to be that superstar player. So, anything else? I think that pretty much covers everything on my end that I have for him.
Yeah, I think this was another good one. Definitely one of the more. And I feel my final thought is I know we both say this pretty much every episode that it's a very interesting draft class because nobody knows where anybody's gonna go. But I think when you talk about guys that you don't really know if they can become all-stars or not, that just makes it that much more interesting to see where these guys are gonna end up going.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean we'll talk about it. I think we're gonna do a mock draft when we get closer to the draft here. But I mean, starting at pick number 1, we have no idea what's going on.
Yeah,
it starts at pick number 1, and from there, it's going to be a fun draft night. I think there's going to be a lot of guys that people aren't talking about that sneak into the first round, just like because I hope Marcus Howard, but that's not going to happen. But even a guy like Cassius Stanley, I know you mentioned him before, but he's been getting a lot of hype recently as a guy sneaking in there. So I think it's going to be very interesting to watch this play out. Looking forward to continuing to talk about that. Appreciate everybody for watching this episode. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll have plenty more coming out over the next few weeks here leading up to the draft. So we appreciate the support, and we will see you guys next time.
Yep.